Hi, Kevin here. Welcome to the Claremont Classic Garage. We did a thing this morning. Don't ask me why I did this, but I did it. Now it's done, so I'm going to get to deal with it. So we hooked up the trailer this morning and went up to beautiful Churchill, Ontario on Highway 11 and dragged these two old 2Ns home. The first one here is mostly complete, although I don't know what year it is. It's an earlier one because it's got the I-beams, but it's got an 8N engine, so the serial number is lost for this one. So I know there's a couple of places on the rest of it where you might find some date codes, and we might be able to sort of figure out what year this puppy is. Narrow it down a little bit anyway. The one behind it, this one is pretty rough, but we'll see what we can find out about it. I'm going to, after lunch, give the engine block a scratch here and see if we can figure out what year at least the engine block is, and see if that kind of correlates to the rest of it. See here, it's got tubular radius rods, so it's like a 44 to 47. 2N is my best guess, and I'll let you know what I find out. We'll grab a piece of sandpaper and see what we can do. The engine seems to be filled with pine needles and stuff, so I don't think it's going to be turning over. But yeah, you never know. These things are pretty hardy. So the most important thing we see here is this tag on the block from Perry Automotive in Barrie. This thing's been rebuilt, and let me tell you, I've had their engines before. I've got two of them around here, and they are fantastic engines. I don't know what they do to them, but they run super, and they've got great oil pressure. You ever find a N-Series tractor with a Perry Automotive tag on the engine, buy it. That's all I can tell you. As I learn a little bit more about these things, I think the engine from that one actually belongs in this one. This is a pre-war, or at least an early wartime tractor. It's probably, I would guess, 1943. And this one over here, you can tell by a couple of things, namely the tubular radius rods, that this is a later one. When I get underneath and start looking at date codes, I'll know for sure. But this one has an engine that checks out as 1943. It's a bit of a hurting unit, but it can be fixed. That's why they have sleeves in them. It makes it really easy. So the best bet, I think, how it would work out for me and make me happy would be to overhaul that engine and put it in that one with all that nice sheet metal. And I'm telling you what, we would have one heck of a nice 2N tractor, you know. And I would do a couple of my little cheater secrets on it, if we were going to keep it. Namely, put an 8N cylinder head on it for the increased compression ratio. And I have an 8N hydraulic pump and lift cover, so we could give it position control. And I would throw in, I have one sitting in the floor in there, Sherman overdrive. And we can make this into just a sweetheart. I would even go so far as to buy from Miller Tire, get the Repop Firestone tires with the crisscross treads and the single rib fronts. I mean, we can do this thing up big time. I don't know, I go crazy with these little gray Fords. They just pull up my heartstrings, man. I don't know what it is about them. Everybody likes the 8Ns, and I like them too, but I just can't get enough of these little gray 3-speed ones. So this old girl here, she was still 6-volt, still had the generator on it, still it has what I'm pretty sure is the original wiring harness in it, or a very nice replacement one. It's got all the right molded ends. It's not all cut up or nothing. The only cobbled up wiring I found on it was for the headlights, and it seems to be all just kind of hung on top. I don't think they cut or messed up anything. We'll see when we get it out. So I didn't want to mess up the generator. I bench tested it. It motors up. The generator works fine. So what I want to do is throw a 12, well, what I've already done, pardon me. I've thrown a 12-volt battery in it with the generator out of the picture, and it turns over just fine, but it had no spark. I am getting current to the top of the coil, so what we're going to do is see about getting some spark to this thing. So we're going to pull the distributor off and see if we can find anything cooking with it. I've got the distributor off of it and mounted on the vise, and we're going to see if we can diagnose it and find out why it's got no spark. A lot of people hate these front distributor Fords. They're just mostly misunderstood. You got to be really careful about your connections. And first thing I see that I don't like is this cheap made in China coil. They're terrible. If you leave the ignition on and walk away and forget it, or you're screwing around trying to get to start, they fry. I do see a original Ford distributor cap. I kind of like that. Maybe that's a sign that there's some good parts inside here, because they're usually full of garbage. Now, sometimes people will confuse these front distributors for a magneto, which it is not. They're just, it's no different than any point ignition system. It just looks a little strange because the coil, the ignition coil, is integral with it. A lot of you will be used to a coil that looks more like this. So hot from the ignition comes into here, into the primary winding of the coil, and then it comes back out here to your points. This doesn't work like that. So let me show you here. Your ignition hooks up to there, just like that one. But how it gets its connection to the points is through this spring here. That, if you look down there, let me get you. Right there in the center, that screw there, that is what this contacts to send the primary current to the points to be grounded so it can switch it. And then when it sparks, the secondary winding, the spark comes out here and goes to there, right there, which goes to the rotor button on the inside of the cap. And then it works just like any normal distributor. So anyway, we're going to have a look at this and see if we can find out what's going on with it and why it's got no spark. There's a couple of ways we could check the points. First way I'll show you is with the test light. Alright, so we got our car battery here. So we've got this side, the positive, hooked up to earth or ground, because these old tractors are positive ground. So keeping it with that, we'll do it their way. The test light goes on the negative post of the battery, and we're going to put it to the points. Now we don't see a light. Let's be sure the light works. Let's touch it directly to ground. Look at that, we've got light. So the light's not on. So what we have to determine, are the points open or are the points closed? The points are closed, yet we have no continuity through them. So that usually means that your points are dirty and need to be cleaned. So we're going to do that first. I'll show you how. So we have to remove this cotter pin so we can pull this off its fulcrum. And then we also have to remove that little screw right there, which is what attaches it to this. So we're going to do that, and when I've got it out, I'll be back. Then we're going to remove these screws and pull this part off. One thing I see already that I like about these, made in USA. This is a good set of points. Now we're going to use a points file to clean them up. And we got them all cleaned up nice and shiny like that. Now we're going to give them a wipe with something really clean and put them back together. Another handy dandy tool to have if you're mucking around with these things is this old Blue Point ignition screw holder. See what it does here? Yeah, I see if I can do it with one hand. You twist it, see? And it grabs the screw like that. And as you put it in and tighten it, plunk, it releases. So we're going to use that to get these darn little screws back in there. And that, we just tighten them just barely enough to hold it. So once we're done, we can use this. This is the adjuster screw. And that's how we'll adjust the gap on these points when we're done. All back together. The worst part of this is usually getting this blasted little cotter pin back in, but we got it. The point gap on this is 15 thousandths of an inch. So we're going to get our old feeler gauge here, and we're going to set that using this adjustment screw. So once you get the gap, how you're happy with it, tighten this screw first, check it again, then tighten that screw, check it again, then go 180 degrees and check it on the lobe 180 degrees away. Should be the same. We're good. Okay, now I'm going to test this with the old test light again. Alrighty, the points are closed. We're going to test this to ground. Light works. Look at that. We're good. Now I'm going to turn the distributor a bit, and you should see this light go on and off. Perfect. Our points are back. All right. So now I'm going to kind of assemble it back, and we'll see if we get continuity through the coil, through the points. And then we should be able to start lighting some sparkies off. All right, so there you go. We've got continuity through the coil, through the points, to ground. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to stick some spark plugs in these wires and ground them, and we're going to see if we get any spark out of this thing. So here's my crude distributor machine. We've got 4 spark plugs, 2 on each side. I can clearly see the electrodes, see if there's spark in there. I've got it hooked up to our battery. Well, not quite yet. We'll hook it up here. I got to do this test quickly because this is probably a 6-volt coil, and I'm going to be pumping 12 through it. So I got my ballast resistor in line. Let's give her a whirl and see what we got. Okay, we got spark there. Let's see here. Oh yeah. See little sparkies? Beautiful. Okay. Our ignition system works. Awesome. So I'm going to go put this thing back on the tractor, and we'll wind it over and just spray a little ether into the carburetor and see if we can get it to cough. I'm going to go put this back on now. You'll notice they made it foolproof to put the distributor back on, so you can't get it 180 out of time. If you notice, the drive key is off center a little bit, and the corresponding slot in the end of the camshaft is also off center. So basically, you kind of get it in the right position by eye, and it'll just go in nice and easy. Perfect. If you got to struggle at all to get it in, you've got it 180 out and you need to turn it around. A lot of people have broken distributors that way because they weren't aware of that feature. So I'm going to get this thing bolted back on the engine. Then we're going to pull all the spark plugs out and have a look at them. I might put 1 or 2 squirts of oil down each cylinder just to kind of pre-lube it in case it actually starts. And then once we know we've got spark going to the sparky plugs, I will tackle this here carburetor. Open it up and make sure it's not all full of junk. That's all back together. I just came to the realization that this is not the original wire harness. The original wiring would have been fabric covered, but it's still a pretty nice harness, and it should be okay to be reused. Anyone that's going to muck around with these end tractors, this is a great tool to have. This is the original wrench that came in the toolkit with the tractor, and it's for taking the spark plugs out. It's just got the right shape, the right size and everything for reaching around all the stuff up in there and getting the plugs out. They all cracked loose, so that's a good sign. So the next step is we're going to go with the air blower and blow all the crap off the top of the head. You don't want junk going down your engine. Not at all. now we can take the plugs the rest of the way out. Aside from being pretty corroded on the outside, the business end of these plugs doesn't look too bad. So I'm going to clean them up, check the gaps, and they'll be ready to reinstall. Then we'll shoot a little bit of oil down the engine and put the plugs back in. I put 2 squirts of oil in each cylinder with my oil can. Our spark plugs are all cleaned and re-gapped to 25 thousandths is the gap on this. Now what I'm going to do is I stuck the crank in the front and I'm just going to give it the old thumb test. All that is, I'm going to put my thumb over each spark plug hole and turn it over a bit and make sure I've got compression of some sort in that cylinder before we go ahead and put it together, because old tractors like this, when they've been sitting around with the air intake off like this, oh, there it goes, they will tend to get stuck valves. Hey, that's interesting. Look at that voltage regulator in there. I guess this thing's had an 8N alternator on it at some point. That's cute. So we're going to do that now. It passed the thumb test with flying colors. We got squeeze on all 4. I put the plugs back in, got all the spark plug wires back on. One thing that is missing from this is the spark plug wire tube. There should be a metal tube that comes down and all these plug wires go into it, and then they've got a little door to come out, and then it extends to there, and the charge it extends to there, and the charge wiring and everything comes out of it at this end. We'll get one. There's used ones around on eBay and stuff, and you can buy new ones at the places that sell reproduction parts. So I'm going to go throw the battery in this thing, and we'll tickle it with a little ether and see if it'll cough. And then once that happens, then we'll open up the carburetor and see what's in there. And then the last step will be getting the fuel tank back to life. I've already had the cap off and looked inside it. It's nice and clean. So we're probably just going to need to service the sediment bulb and make sure this line is free. And then I'll show you the nuances of the N-Series fuel system when we do that. I'm going to turn it over a little bit just to get that oil circulating around before we turn the ignition on and introduce the ether. Turns over nice. That's what happens when you pump 12 volts through a 6-volt starter. Okay, so let's see what happens here. Put the ignition on. I'm going to bend down. This might take 2 hands, so hang on. So, yep, she coughed. So that's good. I turned the ignition off. Now we're going to pull the carburetor off and see what we see in that. So we got the carburetor off. Looks like it's been overhauled. It's a TSX 33. You can see the stamp there, which is the right one for this machine. They're usually easy to tell even if you can't read that. The old TX 33s will have this, the little locking tab for the power screw. What I do find that I like is that the little spring-loaded door in the choke is still there. That's always missing. Oh, this looks pretty good. So anyway, we're going to open it up and see what we got. I've marked the power screw, and the first thing we're going to do is turn it until it seats and count how many turns so we can put it back to that same setting when we put it back together. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and almost a quarter. That's kind of excessive. I think they're usually around 2. But anyway, that's what we'll set it to. 4 1/4. Oh, that's nice. Look at how clean that is. Now we'll take this inlet fitting out and see if it's got the screen filter on that end of it like it's supposed to have. Pretty impressed. It does actually have the proper fitting with the screen. This is the last line of defense for your N-Series carburetor. There's 3 filters in this thing. I'll show you the other 2 when we get working on the fuel tank. So I'm going to blow this thing out and that'll be ready to go back. Now we're going to pop the top off the carburetor and see what's in the bowl. So it's pretty clean inside. The gasket survived. I'll buy a gasket for it when we fix it up proper like, but for now, this will be good enough to get it running. I'm just going to blow all this stuff out and put it back together, and I think we'll have this thing running in no time. That's awesome. I'm going to go put this puppy back on now, and we'll hook up a remote fuel supply to it and see if she'll start. This here is something I made a long time ago that you can make. It's made out of an old fuel filter canister from an old diesel engine. And it just goes right down into the carburetor. It allows you to muck around with ends. Pardon me, it works on Ferguson's too. Without having to rely on the factory tank, which may be poisoned or not working for whatever reason. It allows you to just bypass all that and see if your engine runs. So we're going to put some fuel in this now. And I usually, on one like this that's been sitting around, because I don't know when's the last time it ran or anything like that, I'll put 2-stroke gas in here first, just to give it a fighting chance when it first starts up, to get some oil on the cylinder walls and valve train. So we're going to go ahead and do that, and we'll be ready to try and crank this puppy up. All right, there's fuel in it. I'm going to have to put the phone down to try and start it, because it takes both hands on these. You need one hand to push the starter button and one hand to pull the choke. But we'll see if it starts, and I'll let you know right away. Well, what do you think of that? She's running. I can't run it too long because there's no belt on it. The water pump isn't turning because I've got the generator off. But I'm going to, while it's still running, I'm just going to put it in gear and let the clutch up a bit and see what happens. So it moves back and forth under its own power. Hydraulics go up and down. I tried it in all 4 gears. It's fine. Like every Perry automotive engine I've ever had. Oil pressure out the wazoo. That's fantastic. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to put the generator back on, but not hook it up. So the water pump will be turning, and we can run it a little longer. Okay, I got the generator on basically just to operate as an idler pulley, so we've got enough tension that the water pump can turn. There's always a challenge to these things if the wire tube is missing, keeping the spark plug wires away from the belt. There, that's pretty good. That'll get us through for what we're doing. Now we're going to double check that there's coolant in it, that it didn't just all go in the oil pan when we... Oh, there's coolant. Double check that there's oil in the motor. There's oil in the motor. I don't know what exactly it is, but it's oil of some sort. So I'm going to just start it up and let it run for a minute and burn off this 2-stroke gas. And then we'll start working on a fuel system. I also want to service up the air cleaner here and get that working like it should. I let it run on the 2-stroke oil until it finally quit. So we're going to go ahead now and see if we can service up its actual fuel tank and get it running off its own fuel system. In the meantime, I went ahead and I took the cup off the bottom of the air cleaner, and it is indeed full of heavyweight oil, so that's good. It's dirty, it needs to be serviced, but for now, just to get this thing up and running, it's good. I also went ahead, I had to cut a new piece of hose, and we put the air intake pipe back on. So our intake system is sealed now. Now I'm going to go ahead and pull the sediment bulb out, and we'll see how bad it is. I got the sediment bulb out. It is not an original one, and well, it's junk. The stem to open and close it is missing. We'll just put this one in the used parts pile and see if we can find something better around here to use. Well, I found this one. It'll work. The knob will end up 90 degrees from where it should be on the tractor, but When we actually fix this tractor up, we'll replace it with the right one. But for now, this one will work fine. It's probably off of Ferguson. Most important, it's got the first line of defense, the well screen or standpipe screen, whatever you want to call it, that goes inside the tank. It keeps all the stuff floating around in the bottom of the tank from going down in it, and plugging the second line of defense, which is the screen in the top of this, which I don't think is even there in this one, but I have new ones, so we'll change that and get this thing in usable shape. Oops. We're just going to go ahead and clean this up as good as we can. We'll clean the guck off the pipe threads there. Clean this so you can read it. We'll clean out the inside of the bowl. And this screen has seen better days, so we'll probably replace that and definitely put a new gasket because this one is as hard as a rock. So then, with this screen, and the screen in the inlet of the carburetor, we've got all three lines of defense against crud in the fuel system, and our carburetor should stay healthy and happy for a very long time. So I'll be back once I get all this stuff cleaned up. I cleaned up the screen we had and it seems okay, so I'm going to use it back. I put a new gasket in it. You're going to muck around with these Ford tractors. Always have a handful of these bowl gaskets on hand. It's something that you go through often. Okay, I've got here the original fuel line. There's nothing wrong with it. I've blown it out and made sure that the fittings are nice and free to turn. So we're just going to go and put that back on. And then we can put some fuel in the tank and see if she'll run off her own tank. Alright, we got fuel in the tank. I just saw a drip. Okay, so you can see here, this thing is leaking around the stem. So we got to grab our 7/16 wrench and tighten the gland nut a little bit. Let's see here. There. That should take care of that. Yeah, that nipped it in the bud. Okay, so now what we're going to do, we're going to open the valve and let fuel flow to the system and see if we've got any leaks. Oh, look at that. There it goes. It'll fill up the bowl first, and then it fills up the bowl up through the screen, out to the carburetor. There's look at a few little bits of shit in there already. So basically how this works, this valve, you screw it all the way in. That's closed. And then you can see on there, I think it's 2 turns to open, and then, what does it say? I can't read it. Anyway, you open it a little bit to get the main tank. That lets the fuel come down the standpipe. And if it runs out, you've got a reserve. Then you open the valve the rest of the way, and that'll get you into the reserve so you can get back to the shed or the garage or whatever and get some fuel. Let's look for leaks on the other side. No leaks. We're good. So what I'm going to do now before I do anything, there's all this hung on awful wiring for lights. I'm going to cut that all out of here before I try to start this thing any further. And we'll fire it up and take it for a drive. Well, we're ready to go here. When I had it running before, it was pumping out a lot of blue smoke, but I was running it on 2-stroke gas. So hopefully with this nice, clean, fresh 4-stroke gas, it'll run clean. But we'll find out. Worst comes to worst, it needs a ring job. That's pretty cheap on one of these. I'm just happy that it runs nice and smooth. It's got tons of oil pressure. It starts right up. We do have a good engine here. I'm going to go put this thing through its paces a little bit, see how she runs around the farm. So let's see what happens. Neutral, ignition on. Clutch needs adjusting too. Oh, hey, reverse. Is that reverse? That's reverse. You know what? It's like any 9N or 2N, ain't got no brakes. it sort of works if you really stand on it. So, all in all, I'd say that's pretty good. The smoke seems to be clearing up. I think we've got a winner here. Okay, so I've just had it out and about, running it around for about 15 minutes. I got it good and warmed up now. A few things have come to light. You can hear all the farting and popping from the exhaust. It just needs some tuning on it. The timing and the carburetor need to be set properly. The clutch is way out of adjustment. It needs to be brought up. But the good, this thing is tight as a drum. It drives beautifully. Look at this. Look at the oil pressure. That's hot oil pressure. Wow. Can't expect much more than that from an N. Anyway, I gotta go and get a 6-volt battery so I can get the generator hooked back up and make sure the charging system all works. And I think we got us a winner here. This thing is a sweetheart. So all in all, that was pretty successful. I couldn't be happier with that little 2N. It is just adorable. I still would really love to get this engine united with that tractor, because they more belong together than what's in it. But that 8N engine is pretty hard to pass up on. I had it out the back there. It doesn't just run good. You talk about power, which is something else that I found with those Perry Automotive engines. The one in Trusty Rusty, it's a rocket ship. So anyway, I'm willing to look them up and see if they're still around, and maybe send this one to them and get them to do whatever it is that they do to them, so I can put it in that, and then we can put that 8N engine on this and still have a hell of a nice little machine for somebody. But I don't know. Time will tell. We'll see how it all works out. This is interesting too. I have to look up my air cleaners. This one's got the snaps on it, and that one's got the band with the thumb screw, which is what I'm more used to. See if I notice anything else around here. It's got the oil line to the governor. That's interesting. That's a Ford alternator. Don't see that every day. I'm not sure why they took the cylinder head off. Sometimes these things sit around and the valves stick a little bit. All you got to do is pop the head off and free the valve up, and you can put the head back on with a $10 head gasket. So I don't know why the head stayed off of it. We'll have to look into that when we take this thing apart. But I'm definitely going to take this engine apart and see if I can see anything wrong with it. I'm mostly interested in the bottom end. If the bottom end looks good, I'll go ahead and we'll bang a set of sleeves into it and put pistons and everything. These are great little engines. I hate throwing them away just because, you know, it's a little bit messed up. Because they have the replaceable sleeves, it's not like a car engine where you got to pay a fortune to bore it every time there's one little problem. These things, you just whack another set of sleeves in them and they go again. So we'll see what we want to do. I wouldn't mind that little guy over there, doing him up like I did up that 47 I had years ago. Put the paint it gray like it's supposed to be, but put the scripted 8N tin on it, and paint the Ford scripts dark blue like 2N style. I did one up like that one time and it looked fantastic. So we'll see what we do. Anyway, I think that's about it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something about starting up an N-Series tractor that's been sitting around for a long time. The front distributor tractors can be a little bit daunting until you realize it's just a different way of imagining the usual old points ignition system. Anyway, till the next video, thanks for watching. Please, down below, I'd love it if you subscribe to my channel, leave a comment, hit the like button, share my video, do whatever you got to do, and please come back again. That's the main thing. I love showing this stuff to you guys. Thanks again from the Claremont Classic Garage, and we'll see you next time.